There are a lot of memes floating about at the moment comparing this year to last, and uniformly giving 2020 a pretty bad rap, and it's not hard to see why. And while there are far bigger things going on in the world that are besmirching the good name of this so far unfortunate year, if you're a fan of playing shmups on Nintendo Switch, there hasn't been much aside from Desertopia with which to defend 2020. From its brief YouTube trailer, Galaxy Warfighter looked like it may have something satisfying to offer us. When I first loaded it up and saw the nice little touch of its animated menu background, I began to get my hopes up. Within 5 seconds of pushing start, however, those hopes were dashed as I took control of a ship that unbelievably auto-fires like a ship in a touch-controlled mobile game. There are, of course, very decent mobile shmups out there, but the fact that firing wasn't even mapped to a button for this console release seemed to speak volumes. Volumes that were then fully backed up by the lazy, shovelware nature of the gameplay itself. As you can probably already see, other than bosses, enemies in Galaxy Warfighter all roll in from the right of the screen, then proceed, none of them with any sort of animation whatsoever, to the left of the screen in perfectly straight lines. Sometimes they fire bullets, more as you progress, but there's little that could be truthfully called patterns, and I suspect they may even appear using some sort of procedural generation. This boring, uninspired procession is not helped by either the static backgrounds or the 5 seconds of music which continually loops like the elevator music in a mid-range hotel throughout the entire game. Technically, the game has 100 stages, but the reality is there is only one. One endless stage that goes on and on forever, and just happens to have been arbitrarily broken up into 100 missions. As you progress, the density of enemies and the amount of time it takes until the boss appears do increase, and there are some different shapes of enemy craft, but as you get further into the game, stages become indistinguishable from each other, with stage 92 not being different in any meaningful way from stage 52. Each stage does culminate, if culminate is the right word, with a boss fight. There are 4 different bosses, and there are 100 stages, remember, and they seem to be chosen at random. Weirdly, 3 of them are far easier to dispatch than some of the main stage enemies. One of them does require a small amount of effort to take down the first couple of times you meet, but given that you're likely to face it at least 25 times if, like me, you do find it within yourself to slog to the end of the game, taking it down also eventually becomes a routine task. As well as the mobile autofire, the game has that other classic mobile mechanic of permanent upgrades. And you're going to need them. Your main shot, or your only shot, will quickly become all but useless unless you pay to level it up using the green coins that emanate from downed in-game enemies. At a certain stage, however, your shot will max out, and for most of the second half of the game, you'll be left feeling unsatisfactorily underpowered as you sit in the centre of the screen, relentlessly focusing all your fire on one slow-moving battleship waiting for it to explode. You do unlock some extra upgrades to help, namely a rechargeable pulse and a time stop ability, and if you're really struggling you can just buy more and more health and brute force your way through the game. The time stop ability, by the way, once gained, makes 3 of the boss fights laughably easy, as you can simply pause time at the start of the fight and you'll usually have dispatched the boss even before things speed back up again. There are also randomly generated power-ups that appear during play, ranging from shields to minor shot eruptions to screen-clearing bombs. If you get a clutch of the right ones, bombs and temporary increases to your shot power, you can breeze through almost any stage. If you don't, you can end up kind of shafted. Or at least you would be if it wasn't for the fact that it's easy to hug the bottom of the screen anytime you're in trouble, from where you can easily avoid almost any enemy attack. Now, as you may already be able to tell, I didn't much like this game, but in its defense, I did play it all the way to the end, and that wasn't purely out of an obligation to do so for this review. Partly, I wanted to see what would happen at the end of stage 100, and spoilers, nothing happens. You just fight one of the same 4 random bosses, and then immediately begin stage 100 again. But more than that, there is an unfortunate, unavoidable fact that has to be admitted. These infamously looping mobile mechanics of playing, getting so far, dying, leveling up with the coins you've collected, then wanting to have one more go to try out your new abilities, only to find that you now have more coins and more stuff to buy and so on. These mechanics are kind of addictive, and they do make you want to keep playing. Or maybe more accurately, they prevent you from stopping. However, it's a matter of opinion whether this is actually a good thing. My own feeling is that while in the past developers were also focused on crafting experiences that would keep players coming back, the key word there is they crafted them. They crafted intricate scoring systems, they crafted creative background stories and enemy designs, and they meticulously placed and replaced enemy waves and bullet patterns until they were happy. If you follow the better indie shmup developers on Twitter or elsewhere, you can frequently see those guys displaying the same sort of dedication to their craft too. In games like Galaxy Warfighter, however, nothing of the sort has happened. These games rely on cheap psychological trickery to keep players coming back, and arguably the saddest thing about the rise of games like this is they're all too often successful. To combat this sort of thing, the only possible strategy is to simply not buy them. There are so many quality games out there, like Desitopia, that can all too easily get overlooked, which is a shame anyway, but even more so when people are missing out because of shovelware like this. Now, Galaxy Warfare is not broken. It's a functional game, and it does manage its goal of generating that mobile game forced addiction loop well. So it still gets a 4 out of 10, but this is not something I can imagine many shmup fans are going to enjoy, and I implore even the curious among you to leave this one on the shelf and try to discourage companies from dropping this sort of crap on the eShop. It's never nice or fun to slate a game, but the recent trend of lots of shmups being dumped on the eShop, but with precious few offering any sort of quality, has been a bit depressing. Hopefully things will pick up as we move through the year, and hopefully I'll see you for a more positive review next time. As ever, thank you for watching. Cheers.